everyone, it's Mike from Off-Road Riding Adventures. Just want to make a quick video to tell everybody a little bit about some issues I was having. 2018 RZR XP 1000. The last few times I've been riding it, I've been having some overheating issues. Thinking possibly that maybe the belts were wearing on them. I got about 1,200 miles out of the OEM belt. Another couple hundred out of a Gates carbon replacement belt. While we're up in West Virginia, the machine started overheating on me on the third day. Thinking maybe that the Gates had just wore out that quickly. Changed belts, put another Gates on because I had another spare Gates, and same thing, after a couple of rides started getting some overheating issues. Never really heard any major belt slippage or anything like that with the machine. But the temps were running 220s, 225. One time it actually went into limp mode, and thinking I may either had belt issues with the Gates or clutching. So what I eventually did was I just put another OEM belt on, bit the bullet and paid 200 bucks. All right, so after last week's ride at Sunnyside, I came back, washed down the machine. It was loaded with mud, squirted everything pretty good. It's dirty now because we rode again this weekend, but cleaned everything pretty well. Probably within about 15 minutes after washing it, I went to put it on a trailer to take the machine home. And in reverse, I was like 5,000 RPM, barely moving the machine. So the belt was slipping big time. So I knew that for sure water got in the belt box upon washing the machine. Took the drain plug out, got maybe like a Dixie cup full of water out, a little bit dirty, but nothing major, not a ton of water. Once I got that drained out, I sprayed water up in there to clean the mud out. Once it started pouring out clear, I left the plug out, took it for a ride for about 20 minutes. The machine ran fine. No overheating, no belt squealing, no loss of power. So when we got home, I went ahead and I broke down the belt box, took it apart, pulled the gasket out of the inner belt box. It was in good shape, not pinched down or anything, a little bit dirty on the outside of it. I cleaned it off, cleaned out the track that the belt gasket goes on, flipped the belt gasket over, it was nice and fluffy, put it back in, cleaned the outer housing wedge area out. And what I basically did on that was I went back and put a little grease just for a little more of a protective barrier on the inside in case water was trying to get through, and put it back on. Here's where the entire issue basically boils down to: the design of this belt box. The OEM screws are basically nothing but wood screws, or 1 1/4 inch, I believe, if I remember correctly. They go through here. Once you take the belt box off once or twice and you mix the screws up with the holes they come out of, they just don't tighten back up good enough. So basically I found a couple of especially on the bottom, the bolts were finger tight. You couldn't even get them any tighter. So apparently that's where the water was leaking through. Like I said, it wasn't a lot of water, but apparently enough. Once the water got in there and the vibration started getting on the belt, it was making the belt slip enough not to hear it, but enough to make it work harder and end up overheating the machine. So what did I do to replace it? I went to the hardware store, about 5/16 inch screws, screwed them in. They had the self-tap on the outer back box and they self-tapped on the inner box here. So took it back to Sunnyside yesterday, ran it in the creek several times, ran it in mud holes. I washed it down, no overheating issues or no slippage. So once again, just a poor design by Polaris. I'm no engineer, but basically if I was designing this thing, I think what I would have done is inserted bolt or actually nuts on the inner casing, had them sealed in, and just take bolts where you could put them in there and the inner nut stayed in permanently. They probably saved a couple bucks by not going with that design, so it is what it is. But this was a quick fix. The bad thing was I bought another 2 Gates belts, thinking it was just the belts. Ended up buying an OEM belt at 200 bucks, and all it was I had just enough water getting past my housing cover there where it wasn't causing any abnormal slippage as far as hearing it or feeling the power, but it was definitely heating up the machine. So out of curiosity, I walked over to my neighbor's house who has a 2020 Polaris 570 Ranger just to look at his. The same exact setup. The only difference on his was once I got down here and started feeling some of the lag screws that they put through were actually protruding through the back side. Then I would go to the next one and they weren't protruding through. So someone ran some of the screws on a brand new 2020 all the way through the back side in some areas. In the other areas it was where it's supposed to be. So once again, just a bad design. Like I said, I bought an extra 2 Gates belts trying to save money, thinking, oh, the Gates belts aren't working. That's not the case. I bought an OEM belt. It wasn't working. It's nothing to do with the belt. Strictly enough water getting past because the original lag screws weren't tightening up enough to seal it from preventing some water through. All right, and just to show everybody what I'm talking about, these are 2 Gates belts. Same exact belts. They're the carbon C12 belts. One is brand new. The bottom one has never been on the machine. The top one, maybe 100 miles, if that, on there. The ridges are exactly the same on both sides. Inside, nothing worn on the, what I thought was a worn belt. The ridges are the same on the top as the new one. So once again, I thought it was the belts. Changed out belts, and it wasn't. What it was just the design on the belt box. So if this video can save someone else a few bucks, if you're starting to get slippage or overheating issues, I mean, I went through, looked at the radiator, everything else was going to bleed the engine block through the coolant system, and before I did, luckily I pulled the belt cover off, and that was the root of all evil. So just keep in mind that if you start getting overheating issues, look at your belt box, because literally a cup of water was enough to make the belt basically slip quite a bit. A little bit less water was enough to make it slip unnoticeable, and it was rising temperatures on the belt box.